Go.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to VenTalk Live. Thank you for making the decision to attend tonight's VenTalk, and we hope that you have enjoyed and benefit from attending VenTalk. Tonight, we will be continuing on part 4 of Going for Refuge to the Three Jewels. And with that, we would like to invite Venerable Pensi. Good evening, Venerable.
Good evening, Yao Hua. Good evening, everyone.
Yeah, Venerable, in last month's VenTalk, Venerable shared the story on Shakyamuni's Buddha's kindness, and it is Buddha's kindness is especially great to us because he made the vow to practice and achieve Buddhahood in pure land. Yeah, so at a time where conditions for learning the Dharma was very bad and the morals are weak, afflictions are strong, and human lifespan is short, and they are full of disasters and conflicts. So, in other words, if Shakyamuni Buddha had not made that vow, we will not be able to learn the Buddha's teaching now, because this is the time where conditions for learning the Dharma is not really ideal. If we think a bit further, would we vow to help a complete stranger? It sounds logical that I will help those who are related to me and to those whom I feel in debt to. However, through Buddha's life story, Buddha consistently showed us that life after life, he will uphold his vow to help all sentient beings.
Yes, Yao Hua, if you think about the Buddha's, how he has practiced in his past life in order to help sentient beings, the challenges, the suffering that he undergoes. If you think about this often, then whenever you prostrate to the Buddha, your gratitude to the Buddha will become stronger and stronger, and your refuge in the three jewels will become more and more sincere.
Okay, remember you also said that while Shakyamuni Buddha was still a Bodhisattva, practicing to become a Buddha, he gave away his dearest possessions, including his head, limbs, body parts to us. And in our past lives, we may have criticized him or slandered him or harmed him before. But Shakyamuni Buddha will never harbor any hostility towards us, but instead has only compassion and vow even stronger to teach us when he achieved Buddhahood. I find this a bit difficult to imagine. I mean, how can we have asked for Buddha's possessions or even his life? Yeah, so how could we, have criticized or harmed the Buddha? I mean, he's the Buddha. We as Buddhists would not dare to do such a thing to a Buddha or Bodhisattva.
Yes, now you do not dare to do nasty things to the Buddhas or the Bodhisattvas. But in your past life, before you were taught by the Buddhas, you were not like this. Okay, so the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas would be just ordinary people to you. Nothing great about them to you. And if you had not developed kindness and compassion, then you will also do nasty things to them when you disagree with them. Okay, I will share the story on how the Buddha had to endure hostilities and harm from sentient beings he had vowed to help.
Okay, thank you very much. We would love to hear more Buddha stories.
Okay, so this story is about one of the Buddha's past life. Okay, and this is recorded in the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. Okay, so many eons ago, when the Buddha was still a Bodhisattva practicing the Bodhisattva deeds, there lived a king by the name of Kalinga. At that time, in the mountains, the Bodhisattva was a practitioner by the name called Sandivadin, who had lived together with 500 disciples. And he applied himself to meditation on patience. One day, King Kalinga, together with his queen and ministers, went to the mountains to enjoy the scenery. When the king became tired, he fell asleep, and the queen and her attendants went into the forest to admire the flowers, and there they saw Sandivadin meditating. His body was perfectly still, and then he was very serene. When they saw how majestic Sandivadin was, faith arose in the queen and her attendants, and they made offerings of various kinds of flowers to Sandivadin, okay, and then they sat down to listen to him teach the Dharma. When King Kalinga woke up, he found his queen missing. Okay, and then so he went into the forest to look for them. Okay, and when he found the queen and her attendants seated before Sandivadin, immense jealousy arose in him. So he asked Sandivadin, "Have you attained the 4 formless concentration?" Sandivadin replied that he had not. Then the king asked whether he had attained the 4 immeasurables. And again, Sandivadin replied that he had not. Then the king asked him a third time whether he had attained the 4 jhanas. And again, Sandivadin replied that he had not. The king became very angry, and then he said, "Since you had no attainments, you must be a fraud. Who can trust you here in this deserted place with these women? What do you have to say for yourself living in this place?" Okay, but Sandivadin, he replied, "Here in the mountains, I meditate on patience." The king then drew his sword and said, "Okay, so you meditate on patience? Well, I'm going to kill you and then we'll see how patient you are." So he cut off Sandivadin's 2 hands. Okay, and then he asked, "Now who you are?" Without any fear or anger, Sandivadin replied, "I am Sandivadin and I meditate on patience here in the mountains." Then the king proceeded to cut off his 2 feet and asked, "Now who are you?" Again, Sandivadin remained unflustered. Calmly, he replied, "I'm Sandivadin and I meditate on patience here in the mountains." Okay, so at that moment, the heavens and earth trembled in 6 ways, and Sandivadin's disciples came looking for him. Seeing him severely injured, okay, they were very concerned. Okay, and then they asked, Teacher, while undergoing these unbearable sufferings, have you not lost the thought of patience?" Sandivadin replied, "My mind has not been separated from patience, not even for a moment." The king now became afraid. Okay, and then he asked, "When you said you have not separated from patience, who would believe you?" Sandivadin replied, "My words are not false. If they are not false, may my limbs, which were severed by you, recover as they were formerly." When Sandivadin had said this, his limbs appeared as before. Seeing this, the king was even more frightened. And then he said, "Great sage, I have harmed you because of my ignorance and sin. I now repent these sins to you. Please have compassion on me." Sandivadin said, "It was because of the women that you cut off my limbs with a sword. This did not harm me because my patience is unmoving like the earth. When I have attained the enlightenment of a Buddha, I shall cut away your 3 poisons with the sword of wisdom." When the gods and the dragons of the mountain saw that the king had harmed Sandivadin, they were very angry, and then they stirred up clouds and lightning. The dragons roared and sent down thunderbolts from the sky. The king and those with him became terrified. Okay, and then they cried out, "Great practitioner, please have compassion and save us." Then Sandivadin requested the gods and dragons not to harm living beings for his sake. Okay, and then they became calm and disappeared. Okay, so I will pause the story for now. Yao Hua, do you know who Sandivadin, King Kalinga, and his ministers are now?
Venerable said that Sandivadin is our Shakyamuni Buddha, but I'm not sure who are King Kalinga and his ministers. And yeah, who are they?
King Kalinga is now Kondana. Okay, Kondana, and then his ministers were the 4 other monks that the Buddha first converted in Sanath Deer Park after his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. Okay, so you see, this is the Buddha's great compassion. The first person that the Buddha vowed to help after he gained enlightenment is not his best friend, okay, but King Kalinga, the person who harmed him. The Buddha would help anyone, no matter whether they are his friend or his enemy. Not only that, Kondana is the first disciple to gain arahat after the Buddha gained enlightenment under the Buddha tree, under the Bodhi tree. Okay, so it seems that the more someone harm the Buddha, the more the Buddha is determined to help him.
Yes, this reminds me of what Venerable said in May's VenTalk, when Venerable covered the 4 reasons why the Buddha is worthy to be a refuge. So Venerable said, no matter whether we harm the Buddha in the past or criticize him or slander his teaching, as long as we are willing to turn over a new leaf and learn from him, the Buddha will help us equally.
Yes, that is the great compassion and equanimity of the Buddha. He will help both his friends and enemies equally. Okay, so don't worry if you think that you have criticized Buddhism or the Buddha or his disciples before. As long as you go to the Buddha for refuge, the Buddha will help you. Another lesson that we can learn from here is how the Buddha transformed adversity into wisdom and compassion. When bad things happen to us, instead of blaming ourselves and others, we can actually use that as an opportunity to grow our wisdom and compassion. That is why the lotus is used as a symbol for the Bodhisattva. Yao Hua, do you know why the lotus is used as a symbol?
Is it because it grows in the mud? But when the lotus flower blooms, it becomes big and beautiful.
Yes, that's one reason, but not only that. Okay, as you say, the lotus grows in the mud. So when the lotus is still a seed, it's actually surrounded by mud, okay, dirty stuff. All around the seed is dirty stuff. Left, right, center, top, bottom is all mud. Okay, but the lotus is able to absorb just the nutrients from the mud to grow, okay, and leave behind all the contaminants. Then when the lotus bursts out of the water, it itself is completely pure and untainted by any of the contaminants that surrounds it. So the Bodhisattva is just like a lotus. When practicing the Buddha's teachings, the Bodhisattva is surrounded by undisciplined sentient beings. Okay, those people who are evil and angry and hostile. And so the Bodhisattva will meet with various kinds of suffering caused by them. Okay, but instead of trying to avoid these unpleasant things, the Bodhisattva uses the challenges that he meets as opportunities to grow his wisdom and compassion. Okay, so just like the lotus absorb nutrients from the mud. Okay, so for those of us who are practicing the Mahayana teachings, we should be encouraged by the example of the Buddha. When we meet with adversities in life, instead of praying to the Buddha to take away the adversities, we can pray for strength and courage to overcome our adversities through developing our compassion and wisdom.
Yeah, but that itself is a challenge to me at least. Yeah, so because our normal reaction is to li kutala, that is to alleviate suffering and attain happiness. So I would not want to make my life more difficult, especially if someone had said nasty things to me. I will only choose to avoid this suffering than to take it head on. Yeah, so to me, it is a very difficult thing to do.
Yes, for us now, we will find it quite impossible because we are still beginners in our spiritual practice. But if we continue our learning and keep growing our wisdom and compassion and courage, one day we will also be able to generate the same compassion and determination to achieve Buddhahood like the Buddha. It's a bit like if you are in primary 1, it will be impossible for you to pass an exam in the university. Okay, but yet why do all parents have this expectation that one day their children will graduate from university? It's because there is an education system in place. So there's a path to the university that many children have taken to graduate from university. And there's actually a path for us to Buddhahood, as I've covered in the topic on infinite lives, infinite hopes in March. So don't be discouraged by the example of the Buddha, okay, but instead have an expectation that if you continue with your learning, then one day you will also be able to do it, just like the Buddha. Okay, so Yeah, just as easily as you graduate from university.
Okay, I see, Venerable. But one question. Sandivadin managed to regrow his limbs that were cut off by King Kalinga. So doesn't that imply that he has supernatural powers and he does not feel any suffering at all when the king cut off his limb? So that does not make it difficult for Buddha to practice patience, doesn't it?
No, it's not supernatural powers. Okay, the reason why Sandivadin is able to practice patience and regrow his limbs, this answer can be found in the Diamond Sutra. Okay, so in section 14 in the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha said, in a former lifetime, my body was cut into pieces by King Kalinga. At that time, I was not abiding in the notions of self, person, sentient being, or lifespan. And why not? If at that time my body was cut into pieces, I had been holding to the notions of self, person, sentient being, or lifespan, I would have felt ill will towards Kalinga. Okay, so what this means is that Sandivadin was meditating on emptiness, and therefore he did not have any ill will towards the king. And because he has already realized emptiness, therefore he's able to have control over physical processes, okay, such as regenerating his limbs. Okay, so it's not through supernatural powers, but through the power of wisdom realizing emptiness that Sandivadin is able to regrow his limbs. Yeah, however, that doesn't mean that Sandivadin didn't feel any pain at all. While his limbs were being cut, he would have felt pain just like us. However, by meditating on emptiness, imbued with compassion, he's able to transform that pain into a determination to help the king. Okay, so in a way, he's like a marathon runner who is able to run a marathon in 2 hours. To people who didn't undergo the training, it will be an impossible task to do. And it seems like the marathon runner is able to do it effortlessly without any pain. Okay, but the truth is that he has already undergone many years of arduous training, many years of hard training in order to achieve that feat. Okay, and then even during the race, he had to experience thirst, muscle aches, and pain. Okay, but his training enabled him to overcome them. Okay, and then he enjoys running the marathon despite the physical pain he has to go through. Okay, so in the same way, Sandivadin still has to experience pain, but his training enabled him to overcome any hostility and instead only had compassion for the king.
Remember, but what Sandivadin did was, it looks like a feat that is beyond me. To feel compassion towards someone cutting off your limbs sounds impossible. I will be in unbearable and immense pain.
Yes, it may seem impossible now, but it can be done. This is the path that our great teacher Shakyamuni Buddha has taken. He has been through 3 countless great yawns of such practice. So he has the experience to guide us, sentient beings here in the impure land, having to face suffering every day, face challenge every day. Okay, to also use all this adversity as a means to develop our wisdom and compassion.
Yes, that is the first 2 of the 4 reasons why the Buddha is worthy to be a refuge. He has already solved all his suffering and he has the experience to help us too, because he developed himself in the same kind of environment that we are now in. So really my sincere gratitude to the Buddha.
Yes, so we should take heart from this. Okay, so let me quickly finish up the story of Sandivadin. Okay, so the king, after he repented his sins, invited Sandivadin to his palace and make offerings to him. Okay, but along the way, 1,000 mendicants and practitioners of other faith, okay, when they saw the king honoring Sandivadin, they became envious and then they threw dirt on Sandivadin. Okay, but again, Sandivadin remained unflustered, he remained calm, and then instead made a vow that when he attained Buddhahood, he would cleanse the impurities with the waters of Dharma and would totally purify the attachment. So those mendicants who threw dirt, the leader is now Mahakashyapa. and then the rest are his 1,000 disciples. So Mahakashyapa, as we all know, is one of the first disciples of the Buddha. He also succeeded the Buddha as the leader of the Sangha after the Buddha passed into parinirvana. And then he's also the one who led the first council to compile the Buddha's teachings into the 3 baskets.
Wow, seems like the people who have heard the Buddha in the past are the earliest to benefit after Buddha's enlightenment. But Venerable, it still seems unimaginable to me because sometimes I would think that what they did in the past to have deserved this opportunity to be listening to Shakyamuni's Buddha's teaching in this life. So sometimes I'll be thinking, was I an ant crawling near Buddha 2,500 years ago and hearing Buddha giving a discourse? Or was I an animal, happened to be passing by Buddha? But never did I ever have the thought that I could have done something like King Kalinga or his mendicants to hurt the Buddha or even to eat Buddha's flesh.
Yes, of course, those other scenarios that you mentioned are possible. Maybe an animal passing by when the Buddha was giving a discourse. Okay, so I'm not saying that every one of us Buddhists have harmed the Buddha in the past before, but definitely we have received the kindness of the Buddha before. Okay, otherwise, we will not have so much faith and admiration for the Buddha. Even though now actually we do not completely know all the good qualities of the Buddha, yet we have faith in him. Okay, so this faith does not come from these discordant causes, or it does not come without any causes. Okay, so even if we have not harmed, if we have not harmed the Buddha before and been forgiven by him, we would have received his kindness before, such as receiving gifts, help, receiving his possessions, and even his blood and flesh.
Okay. Talking about blood and flesh, can Venerable share any more stories on this part? I remember there's a story.
Yes, there are actually many stories of the Buddha giving away his possessions and even his life for the purpose of giving us the ultimate gift, the Dharma. Okay, so the next story that I'm going to share is also from the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. So there was once, while the Buddha was going on his alms rounds with his disciples, they saw 2 brothers who were on the way to be executed after being convicted of stealing. When the thief's mother saw the Buddha, she prostrated herself in his direction and cried out for the Buddha to save her sons. Hearing her cry from afar, the Buddha asked Ananda to go to the king and request to spare the 2 boys. Ananda went to the king, made his request, and the king freed them both. So they were very happy, and then of course immensely grateful that they have been spared by the compassion of the Buddha. Okay, so they went to the Buddha, bow at his feet, fold their palms in respect, and then asked the Buddha to ordain them. They want to become monks. The Buddha agreed, and then soon after being ordained, they became arahats. Okay, so liberated from cyclic existence. Okay, their mother also learned the Dharma and then became a once returner, as Sakadagami. Okay, so also after 2 more lifetimes at most, she will also be liberated from cyclic existence. Okay, so Ananda was very inspired by the merits of the Buddha. Okay, and then Ananda thought to himself, what former deeds did this woman and her 2 sons did in order to be able to meet the Buddha, be saved by the Buddha from execution, and eventually attain arahat and free themselves from cyclic existence? The Buddha knew what Ananda was thinking. Okay, so he told Ananda, this is not the first time I have saved this woman and her 2 sons. Okay, many eons ago, I have also saved them before. At that time, there was an emperor in the world by the name of Mahayana. He had 3 sons. The youngest was named Prince Mahasattva. Okay, so from childhood, this younger son was of a loving and compassionate nature and treats all beings as his own sons. Upon a certain occasion, the emperor brought the royal family and his ministers to the forest to enjoy the scenery. The the prince, okay, went into the forest and explored, and then saw a mother tiger who had just given birth to 2 cubs. The tiger was so exhausted with hunger that she was on the verge of eating her young. Prince Mahasatwa then decided to save the tiger family and asked his brothers what he could feed to the tiger. The elder princess replied that she would only eat freshly killed meat and drink blood. So Mahasatwa then thought to himself, since beginningless time, I have been wandering through cyclic existence, wasting life and limb, and through attachment, anger, and ignorance, have not accumulated any merits. For the sake of the Dharma, I should enter the field of virtue. Now, in order to bring about merit, I shall give my body to the tiger and her 2 cubs. Now I'm saving them from obstacles and their lives and giving them joy. When I attain Buddhahood, I will deliver them from obstacles and rescue them from the terrible sufferings of cyclic existence. Okay, so this is the vow that the prince, okay, our Buddha, when he was still a Bodhisattva, made. He asked his elder brothers to go ahead while he settled some private matters. Then going back to the tiger, he laid down in front of her, but the tiger was too weak to even open her mouth to eat him. So the prince took a sharp stick and then pierced his body. When his blood flowed out, the tiger licked the blood, gained some energy, and then able to open her mouth and eat the prince's body. The happy ending to the story is that Prince Mahasatwa was reborn in the heavens as a result of that virtuous act. Okay, and then he actually came back to console his parents who were grieving over his death. Okay, so Prince Mahasatwa was, of course, our great compassionate Shakyamuni Buddha. Okay, the tiger was the mother of the 2 thieves sentenced to death, and the cubs were the 2 thieves. Yeah, so you see, now that we are benefiting from the Buddha's teachings, it could be because we have harmed the Buddha in the past, or we have received his kindness before. Okay, maybe even eating his flesh and drinking his blood.
Thank you Venerable, for sharing this story. I have heard this Buddha story a couple of times, and there were many responses towards this decision made by the Buddha at that time. And after hearing this story again, it made me realize how compassionate Shakyamuni Buddha is. I remember in May's VenTalk, Venerable shared with us the great compassion of the Buddha, that he treats all sentient beings as his only beloved son. It is understandable, so that Shakyamuni Buddha would have couldn't bear a moment to see the tiger or the cubs to suffer. So by offering his body to the tiger and cubs, Buddha saved the cubs from being eaten and alleviated their immediate suffering of hunger, and in long term vowed to rescue them from cyclic existence. I always thought that because of my previous life and current life of hard work to accumulate merits and clearing away obstructions, I'm able to continue to learn the teachings from Buddha. But little did I know that it turns out that the reason why we are saved by the Buddha now is because Buddha has saved our lives in the past and vowed to save us from cyclic existence when he attained Buddhahood.
Yes, the point you mentioned just now about the Buddha's great compassion, okay, and that he treats all sentient beings as his only beloved son is very important. Okay, otherwise, we ordinary beings, because we don't have great compassion, we will find it very hard to understand why the Buddha reacted the way he is, sacrificing his life just for a tiger and the 2 cubs. So if you contemplate further on this point, if the Buddha is able to sacrifice his life for a tiger, then surely the Buddha would be able to save you, would want to save you, already his disciple, from your suffering when you go to him for refuge. Okay, so when we read these stories, we should strengthen our faith in the Buddha to save us when we take refuge in him. Okay, one final learning point before we end. Okay, when we read the scriptures, we should understand that the scriptures and the commentaries are instructions, in that most of them teach the good qualities of the three refuges. Okay, so when we read stories like this, just now those two stories came from the Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish. Okay, so when we read stories like this, we should not read them like a fairy tale that is unrelated to us. Okay, so instead, we should contemplate on the good qualities of the Buddha that are illustrated by the stories. Okay, so we should relate the story to ourselves, how we have been helped by the Buddha in the past and currently being helped by the Buddha, then generate gratitude and develop our faith in the Buddha's ability to save us. There are many ways to contemplate the Buddha's good qualities, and reading the stories of the Buddha's past life, I feel, is an easier way for beginners to start practicing contemplating the Buddha's good qualities. And contemplating the Buddha's good qualities is actually a very important part of taking refuge. Okay, so because the scriptures say, okay, so from the great treatise, okay, reflect again and again upon the good qualities of the Buddha and strive to attain certainty from the depths of your heart. Once you gain this, you reach the very core of the practice of going for refuge. For you will gain certainty with respect to the teaching from which the Buddha arose and the community that practices the teaching. Without this, there is no practice of going for refuge that transforms your mind, not to mention other paths. Okay, so let us think of the Buddha's good qualities often, constantly, okay, and then make this a core part of our practice. I have spent the last 4 VenTalk to share the good qualities of the Buddha. Okay, so I really hope that they will help everyone start on the practice of taking refuge and not just treat taking refuge as a ceremony.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I, for one, will be reflecting on the Buddha's good qualities frequently as part of my practice. So before we end, let me do a summary for tonight. So in tonight's VenTalk, Venerable shared 2 stories. So the first story is the story of Sandipradin. King Kalinga, out of anger and jealousy, hurt Sandipradin, who was Buddha at that time. In the end, King Kalinga and his 4 ministers became the first 5 disciples whom Buddha gave his first sermon to after achieving enlightenment. There was also a sub-story on Kasyapa, who and his 1,000 disciples who threw dirt on Buddha. After Buddha entered Parinirvana, he led the first council to compile the Buddha's teaching. Yeah, and the next story is Buddha sacrificing his life to the hungry tiger and cubs. So from the story shared, you can see that Buddha's compassion is immeasurable. Because of Buddha's vow to help us out of cyclic existence, Buddha had to endure countless hostility and hurt from us. In skillful means just to benefit us, Buddha even have to give away his head, limbs, and body parts. It is because of Buddha has continued to benefit us life after life. We are willing to listen to Buddha's teaching and follow Buddha's guidance out of this cyclic existence. So with that, we will end tonight, but before we end, let's invite Venerable to lead us in the dedication. Venerable, please.
Okay, so let's do dedication. Please put your palms together. Let's recite together. May these profound merits and virtues be dedicated to all sentient beings. May we eliminate all karmic obstacles, and together may we attain the state of Buddhahood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. Hey, good night. Have a great
Good night.
day.
Good night, Venerable. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.